Last year he was a top player in terms of volume on GG Poker. First of all, his incredible love for poker was mentioned. He climbed from the very bottom of online poker. We can say Matthew Bergart won the fight for the happy 3-bet. He won a pot with 7 high in a heads-up match. Not many players did that. Taisto would have been also caught with a weaker hand here, but this time he himself had a boat. Well, classical trap here from Matthew. Big hello to all the viewers of GipsyTeam channel. Today we have a special edition of Big Pots show. The reason of making this episode is unfortunately quite tragic. A Canadian regular, Matthew Bergart, was recently killed at the age of 30. We've been talking about him a lot, and you, Alexei, said that he is one of the most talented players out there. There's a big article about him on GipsyTeam, and first of all, his incredible love for poker was noted. He, as far as I'm concerned, was a record holder for the number of hands played for the last year, among high-stakes players, of course. Yeah, first of all, thank you for having me. Matthew was not a very popular player. He kept low profile, nobody even knew how he looked like. He never visited offline events, but he played a lot online, huge volumes, and people wrote a lot of touching posts about him on 2+2. It was interesting to read people's memories of playing against him. He started playing online from the very low stakes, like NL5, NL10, so he climbed from the very bottom of online poker. And even if not many people knew about him only from our podcasts, maybe, he was the #1 player in terms of playing volume for the last year on GG Poker. It's a really big achievement actually, because playing on GG Poker is tough. You have to face a really tough opposition, like here for example we have a hand from his heads-up match against Viktor Kudinov. So yeah, his opposition was really tough to say the least. We've actually broadcasted this match on our channel more than a year ago. It was a very late night, I remember. Yeah, in some ways this hand became the hallmark of this match and maybe the hallmark of whole Matthew's career. So I think it's reasonable to start with this hand. It's the beginning of the match as far as I remember, so they just started playing. Viktor opens, Matthew defends. It's a correct call. You have to play all the suited hands, heads up. Queen 6-4, action flop, and Viktor starts with a c-bet. No questions here, his hand is a perfect candidate for a c-bet. I mean, he probably should bet this hand 100% of the time. I don't think we need 5-3 in our checking range. I mean, we can check sometimes, but bet looks really good and it's very logical, it's very human-like to bet this hand. We can fold out some backdoors that are stronger, hands like, I don't know, Jack-Deuce of diamonds. Hands like this, potential monster draws or open-ended straight draw and a backdoor flush draw right now are really good to play aggressively. We only want to check this if our opponent puts a lot of money into the pot on the future streets, or if we never fold out draws that dominate us. Here we have an opposite situation where we will fold out hands like Jack-Deuce of diamonds. Although we didn't make him fold 7-Deuce, but he raised, right? It's different. And a very reasonable raise from Matthew, backdoor straight draw, backdoor flush draw, and this is a lot actually for a heads-up match. Oh, believe me, this hand is at least a mix between folding and raising, and I think Matthew chose between those two options and decided to raise. Or just a textbook play. We can try to guess how often he will raise this hand. Well, I don't think really often, maybe like third of the time, or like 50% tops. Or actually I think it's okay to raise this every time. It's hard to imagine this raise to be bad. A Jack of diamonds on the turn actually helps both players, and Matthew checks. He definitely not going to check fold it. I mean, a flush draw in a heads-up game. Well, it's tough to not realize flush draw here. It's a very strong draw in a heads-up match. So whatever Viktor does, Matthew is not going to fold this hand. I mean, if he bombs, like he bets really big, like huge overbet. But it happens really rarely and we can decide on the spot. But besides that, I think he already had a plan to check raise this one. Well, maybe it's not the strongest hand for a check raise. And actually this hand is very technical and I can go on and on about why this hand is not a very good check raise. But I assume he thought that he doesn't want to bet this hand all the time, because he has to give up on blank river cards, He doesn't really want to bluff with the busted flush draw. On the other hand, he doesn't want to give up with 7 high. But if we check, our opponent will often check back, and we can bluff in a small pot on the river. And we're okay with a check-check on the turn with a weaker flush draw. And if he bets, we can check raise once, it's totally fine. We can make him fold some hands, probably. Or maybe he bets for protection with like 8s, and then he has to fold to our raise. I mean, there are those hands from pocket 10s to pocket 7s in Wiktor's range that he can bet for protection, but then if he faces a raise or any aggression, his hands are tight and he has to fold. And Wiktor maybe has some float bets, hands like ace-5 of clubs, that can possibly bet here and then fold, of course, to a raise. So yeah, I think he thought he doesn't want to bet all the time, and this time he decided to check raise. Not sure about this one, not sure if it's justified theoretically, I never checked this out, but I'm sure it's fine in the real game. I can tell it openly to everyone, in heads up you can do whatever you want, it won't be a big mistake. It's really hard to make a big mistake playing a strong draw in a heads up game. You will most likely generate at least some fold equity in any node. Wiktor bets, he has a monster draw now, and basically his hand plays itself. When we have a monster draw, yes, our opponent did check raise and now checked, but still he has a pretty wide range. We can definitely fold out some hands, and we have implied odds, so yeah. All the cards are in our hands, both literally and figuratively speaking. Well, maybe we can find some arguments for a passive play, but those have to be some really good nodes, or maybe something really tricky or sneaky from Wiktor. So yeah, this hand plays itself, although we can discuss sizing choices, but again, if we use solver, we can try a lot of different sizings, and the machine will find a way for each and every one of them. So here if you build your range well, you have enough value hands, enough bluffs, everything is balanced, I don't think the choice of sizing matters at all. Well, maybe Wiktor wants to build his range here around some mid-strength hands, like weak Queen X combos, maybe even some Jack X combos. Ace-Jack with a backdoor he can call on the flop, maybe even without backdoor. Well, he faced not a very big raise on Queen 6-4, I think he can defend Ace-Jack. And Matthew check raises, and he check raises big. Well, if we ask some heads-up professional to analyze this hand, and I want to make it clear, none of those guys are professionals in heads-up. Wiktor is really good in playing heads-up. And Matthew, maybe he wanted this table to feel on eventually, maybe he misjudged Wiktor's abilities, maybe he wanted to test himself. And as I said before, if we raise here, we want to pressure those pocket pairs from 7s to 10s, we want to fold out some trashy hands, and considering Jack X combos, well, I mean, overall I think this sizing is probably way too big. Or maybe he did it because of the river SPR. Oh, let's see what SPR is actually on the river after Wiktor calls, 19.5. Well, yeah, he could have raised a little less, I think. If he were to raise smaller, the pot would be like 21, Wiktor's stack also 21, and SPR of 1 is totally fine and not suspicious at all. He doesn't give anything away. So we save like 1k for the same result. Well, this is how theory should work. And on the river, I think Matthew just checked to give up, because he wants to have some blockers to bluff here. The pot is very big already. So to bluff we want to block sets, we want to block 2 pairs. So a hand like 6-9 of diamonds would be a fine candidate for bluffing. Or maybe some 4x combos. Well, if he check raised 4-5 with a diamond, for example, on the flop, and decided to check raise again on the turn. So yeah, we need a decent blocker here to be able to bluff. So yeah, I think he tried to fold out pocket pairs from 7s to 10s, maybe some bluffs that Wiktor called check raised with, and then decided to bet once. And when he failed to do that, he decided to give up. So yeah, everything looks pretty reasonable, and Wiktor of course has to bluff here every time. A very profitable bluff. You need some really strong arguments to refuse bluffing here. And maybe Wiktor had those, they've played a lot against each other, and of course Wiktor studied Matthew's game. And maybe he just felt that this double check raise is very strong, and maybe Matthew has some ace-king combos, and this check is very often a trap. So yeah, for some reason Wiktor decided not to bluff. Well, he min bets here, but basically it's a check. It's the same as him giving up, or maybe it's just a misclick. Could very well be a mouse slip. But to me it seems that he decided to give up here. It's not a theoretically correct play, but maybe he thought that after check raising twice, his opponent really have a strong hand, and he has very little fold equity here, so it's fine to just give up. Maybe this was his line of thought, but anyways, it's just a gift for Matthew from Wiktor. Although eventually Wiktor won this match pretty confidently. But anyway, it became a highlight because of course Matthew called, one big blind in such a pot. The pot odds are amazing, like 1/200 or something like that. So yeah, of course you have to call, even with 7 high. We beat 5-3, we even split against 7-5, so yeah, with such pot odds we have to call. Well, actually this is a very technically difficult hand, and we never know why Wiktor decided to give up, unless he comes here and tell us exactly why he did it. Or maybe he can tell us in the comments. He will probably watch this video, it would be really interesting to know. Well, I dare to assume that this double check raise line looked really strong for him. Well, maybe Wiktor tried to fold out a hand like this, some busted flush draw with this min bet on the river. What do you think? Oh no, even 5 high calls here. For a potential split, I mean one big blind, no, I don't think he can fold out anything here.
Бесплатное обучение, высокие откаты, щедрые бонусы. Стань частью команды уже сейчас. Подавай заявку. Ссылка в описании.
Second hand, a very tough lineup if we consider the level of play for 2023. We have like 4 players here who were easily top 10 in 2023. And David Jan is also not a beatdown. He's a great, really great tournament player. He is what we call here mom's friend son. He is very successful, everything is perfect, perfect family, perfect business, a lot of Triton wins, successful at high stakes cash. And the 4 players I mentioned before: Taisto Janter, a top regular from Estonia. Bergart is one of the best players in the world. Wiktor Malinowski as well, one of the best. And finally Matthew with the top volume in 2023. And also a top 10 player. I think Matthew is on the same level with Taisto, Bergart and Wiktor. Well, maybe a little bit below, but around this level. Magic here tried to save some money, he folded against a 3-bet, which happens really rarely for a recreational player. He and for some reason David Jan as well play with a 40 big blind stack, and to call it 10 blinds 3-bet is too expensive when you only have 40 behind. So yeah, some sort of a MTT-like hand in terms of stack sizes here for Magic. Yeah, you're right, it's a minimum buy-in for an empty table. He decided to play with 40 BBs for some reason, and this hand is very interesting. A lot of exploitation going on here. Both were playing far from theory, using their gut, using their mental abilities. At a regular table without antis, we usually try to isolate recreational players, so we 3-bet a lot. We want to play heads up against him, we don't want multi-way pots, but here Wiktor decided to call with pocket 7s, maybe because of antis. Because with antis we have to call more overall, and it would really suck to get a shove from a recreational player. Also, yeah, maybe antis are the reason, because we want to play wider with antis, we need some calling range here, and then we decide if 7s are good for calling or not. Anyways, it's a very standard squeeze for Matthew with ace-10. And it's enough dead money in the middle for us to stack off against Magic. Almost 3000 of dead money, and it's fine for us to stack off against a pocket pair. We can fold out ace-jack offsuit, so yeah, we are okay squeezing and stacking off with this hand against a recreational player, because of the extra 600 from Wiktor. So we can say Matthew won a fight for a happy 3-bet. Yeah, that's right, a very happy squeeze for Matthew here. Wiktor decided to call, and we are already in an uncharted territory. I mean, it's really tough to put Wiktor on a range here. Ask different professional players, and everyone will give his own vision, his own version of his range for this spot. For example, does he have suited connectors here? Does he have a hand like a 7-6 suited? I personally think not, but I wouldn't be really surprised if I'm wrong. So yeah, I already can't estimate Wiktor's range here, so I have to make some assumptions. It all comes down to how he estimates pot odds, all those antes and stuff, how he constructs his ranges in the first place. I mean, would he call those suited connectors hands like 6-7? Opponent raises 3 big blinds, it's a different story. It of course affects the whole math of the situation. So yeah, probably only Wiktor knows what he plays here, and Matthew, I think, also had no idea. A very unconventional start to a hand, 3 big blinds, a raise, a call from Wiktor, and then another call against a squeeze. So yeah, well, he definitely has some pocket pairs like 5, 6s, 7s, so he should feel himself really good on this board. We don't know about suited connectors, we don't know about broadways, suited broadways, hands like king 9 suited, for example, but we definitely know he has those pocket pairs, 5s to 8s. So yeah, it's a board I think we can check a lot, and we either put a lot of money, so bet really big, or we check. I don't see a reason to bet small on this board, in this spot. Our opponent again has a lot of medium pocket pairs, we have $5,000 in the pot already. So in Matthew's shoes we want to bet 2/3 of the pot, with like pocket 10s for example, to attack this part of villain's range. So we either bet big or check, and Matthew decided to check with his nut flush draw, which is probably standard. We have 2 options, as I said, bet big or check, and both looks fine with ace-10 of hearts. By checking, we don't fold out hands like king 10 or jack 10 suited, which we dominate, and maybe we can check raise if he decides to bluff those. So yeah, checking looks totally fine, when we have a pot of 5,000 and around, I believe, 13k behind. We can't see right now, but around 13k. And for an SPR of 2, we have a stone cold nuts. So our goal is to shove all of our money into the pot quickly. Look, I have an interesting question. If we check a nut flush draw here, for example, can we say that this way we protect our checking range, because we still have a hand that is not completed? Or is this logic wrong scientifically? Well, in my opinion, it's not a correct way of putting it. We don't really care that much about protection with such an SPR. To protect the range, in the first place, yeah, that's a good question, let me answer it. We sometimes really need to protect our range in deeper SPRs. For example, if we never have flushes on the river with an SPR of like 20, our opponent can definitely exploit it and put a lot of pressure on us. Well, he can bet huge, like 6x spot. For example, if you are in a spot like this against Stefan, he will bet like 6x spot, and then you have to play a guessing game with pretty much any hand in your range. Even with a strong hand, we have to guess whether he has enough bluffs or not. And with that, he can use huge bets with a much wider range. But with the SPR of 2, it's not possible. Even if Matthew never has any flush draws in his range and flush completes on the turn or on the river, a hand like pocket aces would be totally enough for him to play for stacks. And there's nothing Wiktor can do about it. So the lower the SPR, the less important it is to protect your range. Aces are enough to protect our range here, and even if we have 6 of hearts on the turn, Matthew still cannot fold his aces. Got it. Interesting decision from Wiktor, he decided not to bet here. Oh, 16k, he has 16k in his stack, well the SPR is 3, not 2, but everything I said is still irrelevant here. Wiktor's hand here is also pretty much nutted for him. I mean, 6s would be better because of the open-ended straight draw, but 7s are still good enough here to put a bet and play for stacks. But he decided not to bet, probably he realizes that he will not often see a call here. His opponent will mostly check fold or check raise. And it's not the best option for pocket 7s, so he decided to pot control in some ways and to see the turn card. If he checks twice, then our pot share goes up, and we can maybe start value betting ace-king, but if he checks only once, and we bet, he will most likely check fold or check raise. But after 2 checks, we will see some check calls. After 2 checks, it's a different range we are facing. He's not gonna check raise a lot anymore, and we can probably even value bet ace-king twice. So yeah, betting flop is very profitable, definitely, but checking flop can also be profitable if our opponent makes some mistakes on the turn. So we give him an opportunity to make mistakes on the turn, to construct his range on the turn incorrectly, and we can use it. So it's an advanced thinking. But the solver would probably mostly bet on the flop with correct inputs. So Wiktor deviates from the GTO line, probably expecting his opponent to maybe make some mistakes on the turn, so that he can generate some extra value this way. And I said all of that, and it is actually what's going to happen. I mean, Wiktor will play a huge pot eventually, very unconventionally, and while babbling about his decision making, I forgot all about it. But yes, this is exactly what we are going to see. Wiktor will try to outplay his opponent and force him to make mistakes. Matthew checks again, and let's think what his plan is. I think it's a pure check raise on the flop, but on the turn, I'm not sure. Or maybe it's not a pure check raise anymore. The ranges are different, and now if Wiktor bets, we never fold out hands that are stronger than ours. I mean, if Wiktor bets on the flop with hands like ace-5, although no, we won't fold out hands that are better, but we have enough equity to stack off with pocket sevens, let's say, on the flop. On the turn, we don't really want to stack off against sevens. So yeah, we don't make him fold hands that are better, we only fold out hands that are worse. He can sometimes bluff with a hand like Jack-10 of spades, and there's no real reason to fold out this hand. He now has less equity with only 1 card remaining. We dominate him at the same time. Plus our equity against 7s and 6s is not that good anymore as it was on the flop. So yeah, here I think Matthew would prefer check calling, and that's exactly what he did. Yeah, I forgot all about it, and even still I came to this conclusion, but it's a very logical one. It's very understandable, his desire to check all this hand. The ranges are different now, our equity with our flush draw goes down on the turn, and we don't really want to fold out hands like King-Jack. I mean, it's still fine to fold out hands like King-Jack, but he has 2 times less equity with those hands on the turn. Only 1 card to go on the board. And maybe he will bluff some rivers that actually improve our hand. So there are probably some reversed implied odds here for Wiktor when he bluffs hands like King-Jack. Well, King-Jack of hearts is a disaster for Wiktor, and he can easily bluff if a heart comes on the river. So yeah, Wiktor bets, he targets ace-king combos, and it's interesting that if he bets 7s on the flop, ace-king is a check raise mostly for his opponent. So if he bets on the flop, he gets a check raise from ace-king, but if he delays, then his opponent can't probably check raise ace-kings anymore. He would check call it or even check fold or value bet himself. So he gets just as much money as he wants with his pocket sevens. It's a minor thing, but still it's an advantage of playing a delay c-bet. So yeah, everything goes according to Wiktor's plan until the river, where King of Hearts comes and Matthew decides to block bet. So again, Wiktor was value betting against ace-king, and now ace-king improved. This card improves Matthew's range a lot overall. And he also has some bluffs, hands like ace-queen. He has less ace-queens than ace-kings, but even still he can sometimes bet like this as a bluff to maybe fold out pocket sevens, let's say. He can fold sometimes a hand like this with a 10% bet. It's really awkward for Wiktor to call this hand. Because in terms of possible bluffs for Matthew, we only have some random ace-queens. They decided not to bet flop, not to bet turn, and not to check raise turn. Well, not a lot of combos in the end of the day. I still don't think he will fold this hand. Well, maybe he can fold 5x combos, but not 7s, I think. And in the end, he decided to go all in. So he thinks there are no flushes in Matthew's range, right? Because he will never fold out any flush even when he goes all in. Oh yeah, of course, in this spot he makes his play specifically against ace-king. It's a really tough hand to analyze, but maybe that's exactly what our viewers would like to see. Let's go back a little bit to the turn, or actually to the flop. On the flop, Wiktor takes this game into the deep forest. I mean, how you can get extra EV in this spot? You can cap your opponent's range to one exact holding, which is ace-king, and then play perfectly against ace-king. So he wants a spot where he gets maximum information, where Matthew doesn't bet, he doesn't check raise, and they are in the node where Matthew has maximum amount of ace-kings. And the weaker the opponent is, the more likely it is to get to the node where he actually has only ace-kings, because other hands he would play differently, like check raise, bet, or anything else. So he plays other hands differently, and we are left in the node where he only has ace-kings, and we get 2 streets of value from this hand. Wiktor could have easily bet again on the blank river. So yeah, he's trying to force his opponent to make a mistake, where in a certain node he has a very obvious part of his range. And this is exactly what Wiktor does here. His opponent didn't check raise the flop, he didn't bet or check raise the turn. And here, again, the weaker the opposition is, the more ace-kings are going to be in his range in this spot. Well, maybe some players would have like 90% of ace-kings in their range in this spot, and Wiktor can easily value bet again brick river cards. Well, it's a very profitable play. And you actually want to check raise your flush draws on the flop and forget all about this hand and go play the next one. I mean, it's much easier mentally to play this way. And if villain actually plays like that, then he would have all those ace-kings in his range, and he bets 10% pot with it, and we shove, and then he has to guess. Because Wiktor shoves any hand that beats ace-king, like 5-4 for example. And then Matthew has to guess with ace-king if Wiktor has enough bluffs in his range to call it. And ace-king is exactly the combo Wiktor is trying to make indifferent in Matthew's range. Well, 7's maybe not a great hand to bluff, but it doesn't really matter here. It's about the bluff itself, and probably Wiktor will overbluff here significantly, but it's already a leveling war. Leveling means he thinks that I think, that he thinks that I think, and so on. Matthew's hand is obvious to Wiktor, it's ace-king. Well, not in this case, but you get it. So Matthew has to guess whether Wiktor is value betting here or bluffing. Well, most likely he's value betting, right? So Stefan really likes to put opponents in a spot where they either overfold, so fold more than they should in theory, or they have to think a lot about the spot, how much I want to call here, like is it 20%, is it 30%? So he has a very tough decision, he has to think about it a lot, and he will never overcall. He may overfold easily, or he has to work really hard, think a lot to try to call optimally. So the chances of him overcalling are slim to none, and it makes it a great opportunity to bluff. So yeah, for advanced players, it's an obvious spot that they both work around ace-king combos, and yeah, technically this hand is really hard. And eventually Wiktor went for a really expensive bluff on the river. And the whole thing looks pretty reasonable and logical for Wiktor. He went for a tough line on the flop, and even pre-flop he could have folded this hand pre-flop. It's not mandatory to defend it with a weakened range after just calling a Magic's open raise. So he chose a tough line on pre-flop, a tough line on the flop, and he used his last opportunity to win this hand on the river by bluffing his 7s. So yeah, I want to highlight Wiktor's play here, because it's a very technically advanced play from him, and he does it a lot. Even back in the day I saw some of his hands from 2020, and a lot of them were played like clockwork. He targets a certain part of opponent's range, and he plays perfectly against this part. And it shows his very high level of understanding of opponent's ranges, and a lot of experience also. But here we can say that Matthew actually outplayed him, because he ended up with a hand that's not ace-king. And of course he happily calls. One of the best situations in high-stakes poker actually, when your opponent tries to represent a hand that you actually have. Really nice feeling. Well, maybe on the river it feels not as good as on the flop, where for example you have a straight and your opponent tries to represent a straight, and you allow him to bluff and you just call it down. Yeah, I'm feeling great. And I assume Matthew was really happy here as well, after betting 10% of the pot and getting shoved when you have nuts. Well, of course, it's a nice feeling. He also outplayed Wiktor here, but again, I want to highlight Wiktor's play here. It's amazing on every street. Well, maybe it wasn't necessary to bluff on the river, but believe me, it's a fine bluff. I'm trying to put my ranges here, and yeah, I'm the guy who will scratch his head thinking what he should call and with which frequency and so on. And with my ranges, I'd say it's a good bluff. It would have worked against me. We're not printing with this bluff, but it's a plus EV bluff nonetheless. Okay, next hand against Taisto Janter from Estonia, and Misha Inner is here as well. Yeah, a very interesting lineup here overall. Nikolai Evdokimov here as well, which you rarely see, and I don't think we have ever seen him in any of our episodes. Only as an expert, because Nikolai Evdokimov is Durdom 1. Oh yeah, he played 20k for some time. Well, actually, this lineup is a little softer than the previous one. Goofy Monkey, a regular from Hong Kong, maybe the next Chinese star, but for now his level is not that great. And Mars Wu is a recreational. So yeah, only Taisto here is probably from the highest level of players. Okay, everyone hits something on the flop. Misha, of course, always checks here after calling the big blind, and Taisto has two options basically. Those are betting small and check raising. Both options are fine. None of them is better than the other, and ideally he wants to have sevens in both check raising and betting ranges. So a high-level player should either randomize or choose the option that he thinks would be best against a certain opponent. Like we check against Matthew, we bet against other guy, and so on. And he checks. Is it the same for both heads-up and multi-way spots? Or maybe the fact that we are playing a three-way inclines us to a certain play. Oh yeah, multi-way our play is more opponent-dependent, so we are less concerned about balancing our ranges. But set here is a key combo, just as flush draw in the previous hand, set here is a key combo, and we want key combos to be in every possible node of the game tree. The thing is that whichever way to play this hand you choose, you will have an opportunity to play for stacks. And spoiler alert, we will get here to the river with a very small pot, but they will find a way to play for stacks anyways. There's an old poker rule, I believe Beluga Whale was the one to come up with it, maybe some old school guys remember him. And it goes like this: if you lost a small pot with a set, you've played this hand wrong. So with the set or with any other hand from the very top of your range, you have to play for a big pot. You have to find a way to play for a big pot. And it's up to you how to do that. And in this hand you will see the pot will very quickly grow from 7 big blinds to 100. Quicker than you can imagine. Not a very pleasant turn card for Misha. And we should also highlight Matthew's check on the flop. Not a standard play. This hand should bet a lot. But multi-way again, yes, King-Queen is a very nice looking hand on this board, but do we have 3 streets of value against Taisto, let's say? Well, probably not. Maybe only if we hit a king or a flush. So yeah, this hand's worth like 2, maybe 2.5 streets of value, so we can easily delay betting to the turn. Pretty much the same logic as for Taisto's sevens. So yeah, for some reason Matthew decided to check, even though it's a very high frequency bet. But it's okay, theoretically, I think, because again we don't have 3 streets of value here, so we can as well start with the check. King on the turn is a great card, because opponents have hands like King 10, King Jack, Ace King, and they will put a bet with those hands, and they basically have 0 equity against our hand. It's a great turn for Matthew, his pot share goes up significantly, both opponents have offsuit King access in their ranges, and they will put at least 1 bet into the pot with those. Yeah, this hand is remarkable because we have a great flop for everyone. And then we have a really nice turn for everyone, almost everyone. Yeah, that's true, and Taisto starts betting. Well, no questions about it, it's a great bet with a set. He wants to get value from some King X combos, from some Queen X combos that checked on the flop. He also fine with folding out hands like 8s and 9s, because those hands will never put any money without hitting a set, and even though the chances are very low, he will lose a huge pot if it happens. So yeah, logically we really want to bet our sevens on the turn. Matthew calls. Do we call here every time? Is it a pure call with top 2 pairs, or do we raise sometimes? Yeah, I think he was choosing between raising and calling. and it's actually easier to play this hand as a raise. And it's also opponent dependent, because Taisto is a guy that can make any pot huge in no time. Like for example, if Misha folds and they are heads up on the river, Taisto can easily bet like 5x pot on a blank river. And Matthew knows it. So against a guy who will easily increase the pot himself, we don't have to raise king-queen every time. But against a weaker player, I think it's a pure raise. Because the hand is worth a lot, and if our opponent won't put bets himself, we have to do it. Yeah, we have to take charge and lead the way. Yeah, we have to raise ourselves because our opponent won't put money himself. But here we have a very competent opposition who will easily play for stacks in pretty much any spot, so it's fine. And Misha overcalls. He could have considered check raising here, but all in all his hand plays itself. We have some sort of a bluff catcher with a flush draw as backup, so it's a very comfortable check call, and a lethal river card for Taisto. Oh, and a non-conventional check on the river from Taisto. Maybe he thought there are a lot of queen x combos in opponent's ranges, not an easy spot actually. I don't know why he went for a check raise instead of betting. He's not blocking a king, and king x is not betting here. Yeah, very unconventional line. He is targeting specifically queen x combos with this check. Maybe he didn't care about the king, thinking that we will not make a lot of money against the king anyways if we block bet, for example, and queen x combos may not raise against the block bet. So he decided to check raise to specifically try to cooler queen x combos. There are not a lot of them, but there are some. Maybe that's what he thought, but I didn't expect him to check. Well, maybe he did that because of his reads on Bergart. Maybe he thought that Bergart will often bluff here and will never go to showdown with the hand with zero equity. He has all of those jack tens and flush draws in his range, and maybe Taisto thought that he will always bluff those hands even against two opponents. And Taisto won't get any value from those hands otherwise. Yeah, maybe he's trying to get some value from bluffs. That's a good point. A lot of jack ten combos here, flush draws. Yeah, he also gets some value from bluffs this way. But I think that he first of all targeted queen x combos. We want to play for stacks, and we think which hands would pay us off. And those are queen x combos. A very tricky play from Matthew. He bets really small, trying to represent a king x combos or maybe some weak queen x combo. And yeah, the guys are again deviating from the theory. Yeah, and considering Misha's play, after Taisto preflop raiser checks and Matthew bets small, isn't it tempting to raise his queen 8 combo? Oh no, we have 3 players on the river and we have a weak queen, and our opponent Matthew, by betting small, he represents, as I said before, a strong king or a weak queen. So he represents a hand like queen 9 or queen 10, and we lose to both. So yeah, queen 8 is nothing but a bluff catcher. He may even consider folding, although no one will actually consider folding in the real game, because Matthew can easily bet worse. He can bet king x combo. He can have a bluff, as you pointed out. Well, we don't really beat value hands, but it's a nice bluff catcher. It is a hand that our opponent is trying to represent, so it's a nice call. And now, when we face 2 shoves, it's a very nice fold. Yeah, Taisto's trap has worked, but it turned out that the hunter is the prey in this case. Yeah, exactly. Well, probably not a very great joke, considering the reason that we are reviewing Matthew's hands today. So yeah, probably not a great idea. Well, black humor, right? And from what I know, from what I read about Matthew, he was a guy who would not get offended by things like that. Yeah, he trapped his opponent here really well, and again, a very tough hand technically. And a happy fold from Misha, and it looks like he showed his hands to everyone else because we see the hand. Okay, thank you very much, Alexei, for joining us. We wish you a best of luck in your both poker and streamer's career. Thank you for helping us to honor the memory of Matthew Bergart. Again, I want to say that high-stakes poker has lost a very bright character and a very good, very talented player. Stay tuned for the upcoming new special episodes of Big Pots. Thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.